Hey guys, Ariel over here at Nyth today. You can probably see Grizzly laying behind me. She likes to alternate. She was on the couch sleeping for a while. Now she said the kitchen floor is a better spot. Anyway, I am here today to talk about tiny house relationships because this is a question I get pretty frequently. Something along the lines of, how does living in a tiny house affect your relationships? How would this affect it if you had a romantic relationship? Would this be a deal breaker if you start a relationship with somebody who wasn't living in a tiny house? That kind of thing. And so, since so many of you guys ask, I'm going to try to answer from my perspective. Now, there are a lot of people out there in the world, if you haven't noticed. Most of us seem to be very different. So what you are getting is my personal perspective on this. I think that a tiny house is much like most other kinds of houses in that the main point of it is having a place to live, a place to be warm and dry and comfortable, have some privacy, have a space, keep your stuff, a place to sleep, a place to eat, all that kind of stuff. So in that way, a tiny house is no different than an apartment or a condo or a single family home or a monster mansion, because at its root, that's kind of the point of having a house or a dwelling, a place to live and have as your home. Now, got my attention for just a minute. I had a flock of trumpeter geese fly over the house. I do see them around here fairly frequently, but they don't always fly right over the house, and they're kind of loud. But back to what I was saying. So in that way, a tiny house is a place to live. It's a different style, it comes with different benefits and different challenges, but it still ultimately is a place to live and to have a home. So for me, I don't think that affects really anything about relationships personally. Yes, if you love everything about a tiny house lifestyle, either because of the mobility or the freedom or the minimalism or the less bills or the less time to clean it or the smaller footprint or whatever. People have a whole host of reasons why tiny houses are something that works for them. So whatever your reasons are, if that's why you are living in a tiny house, then yes, I could see that could be a barrier to having a close relationship with somebody else, but only because ultimately it's not the dwelling that's the barrier there. I think it's that you have different goals. If you have a friend whose main goal is that they want a McMansion and 47 bedrooms and a triple master bathroom and a swimming pool in the backyard or whatever, I don't think it's at all those things or the house itself that creates a barrier there, but it probably is an outward indication that the two of you have different enough interests and values that, not that you can't be friends or that you can't get along, because hopefully you can at least get along minimally with everyone, but it probably is an indication that you have different values and interests, fairly deeply rooted, and so maybe two people with those different interests are not going to end up being very close friends. But I don't think it's because of the house, if that makes any sense. So that's kind of how I look at it. I live in this tiny house. Will I always live in this tiny house? I don't know. Personally, I like the minimalism-ish side of it. I like the freedom side. I like the independence. I like a lot of those things. I may very well live in a small house attached to the ground on my own property someday. I don't know. But if the house creates a problem with a relationship with somebody, I don't think it's the house. It's that I value those things and other people value different things. And that would be the same even if I wasn't living in this particular house. So that's kind of my perspective on that. That the house itself does not create issues. It's that the house you live in may be an indication of your other values or priorities. And if those are too different, again, not that you can't get along, but it may not be a good foundation for a real close friendship or a romantic relationship because I think that herd of trumpeter swans, their flock is just circling my house. I've never heard them this long. I don't know if you can hear them through the window. It's open a crack, even though the fire's going. It got pretty sunny and the fire's dying down and it's warm in here. So yeah, that's kind of how I look at that. Now, as far as space with more people, I'm really comfortable in here by myself. I've been comfortable in here with guests. I've had various overnight guests. I've had friends or family stay for days or up to a week or so at a time. It does get a little snug, especially when you got people traveling and they've got their luggage. It's not like they have their drawers and their cupboards and stuff. And you know, it's usually nice when they leave again to be like, oh, okay, it's back to being just my space. But I love having people, you know, that I care about come and visit, and so that's not a problem. Every now and then having a little more space would be nice. Now, I do have lots of friends that live in tiny houses as couples. There's tons of those. I have several tiny house friends that live in them as families, you know, husband and wife, a child or two or three, or 2 or 3 kids and a very large dog, or that kind of thing. And a lot of them are very, very happy with what they're doing. From my perspective, I don't know that if it was me, a husband, and 3 children, that I would want this little space. I think that would feel a little tight. Maybe that's partly because I do live in such a snowy area, so you can't just overflow into the outdoors quite as much all year long as if you lived in a warmer place, but that's just my perspective. I think 2 people could certainly be very comfortable. You know, let me say, I would be comfortable with 2 people in this space. More than that, I would probably personally want a little more space. But like I said, I know other people who have, you know, way more than that. There's several families with 7 or 8 kids living and traveling in school buses, all that kind of thing. So there's a lot of options. I think a lot of that, again, comes down to your personal likes and dislikes and comforts and needs and all that. But again, I don't think it's the house that is an issue or not. The house itself is not a deal breaker or maker. I mean, I've met other folks who have lovely tiny houses that just we have different personalities and interests. Even though we have that one in common, we have an awful lot of other different ones, and nothing against some of those people, but there's other people that live in beautiful tiny houses that would not automatically be my closest friends. Just because we have one interest in common doesn't mean we have a lot of interests in common. And not that that's anything good or bad, it's just the house, I really don't think, makes or breaks a good relationship, whether it's a friendship or a romantic relationship. Not that it's anybody's business, but people ask me why I'm here and I'm single. I'm independent. I'm stubborn. I like being self-sufficient. I always have. I've only met one man in my life that made me really, really want to give some of that up in exchange for building a close relationship with another person. He didn't feel the same way. I still do, so that's that. It probably is going to be just me here for a very long time. Not generally interested in changing that. That's just me personally. Like I said, that's probably not anybody's business, but I do get asked about that a lot. So that's just kind of my perspective on the whole tiny house relationship thing. I don't think that whatever kind of house you pick, I don't think a monster McMansion should dictate who you can and can't be friends with. But if that's what's really important to you to have, again, I think it relates to some underlying values and priorities, and so it is probably going to, those things, not your house, are going to affect who you end up in the closest relationships with. And I think a tiny house, a monster house, anything in between, is very much the same way. Like many other lifestyle choices, I've got friends who love to travel all the time. They're not likely to end up being very close friends with people who like staying in one spot all the time. Again, not because they have anything against each other, it's just if you really like to go all the time, it's hard to be close to somebody who stays all the time. You tend to be better friends with people who travel all the time. So that's just variations in life, and I think a lot of those outward things, I mean, this goes way beyond houses. This goes to what kind of car you drive, what kind of clothes you wear and stuff. A lot of those outward things, I don't think, make or break any of your relationships with other people so much as they're indications of your priorities. Sometimes they're not. I get that. Sometimes you have something because it's simply your circumstances, and sometimes you have something because you haven't thought about what your priorities are, which is one of my goals here, to help people stop and think about what are their priorities so that their lifestyle and choices fit with that and make their priorities possible. So it's a generalization, but for me it's a little bit like, I drive a 20-year-old van with almost 250,000 miles on it now. I love my van. It's awesome. I'll probably do a video on my van at some point. But I don't have anything against somebody if they show up in a brand new car that costs $200,000. But if you show up in a brand new car that costs $200,000, that probably tells me that at least in the world of vehicles and transportation, we have different mindsets and different priorities. For me, mine's a way to get from A to B, a way to haul stuff around, a way to move things, to move people, and sometimes to sleep in for me. In the most time and money efficient way possible. If you have a brand new $200,000 sports car, that list of priorities is probably not your main list of priorities. And again, I'm not saying that's good or bad or no one should do it, but I think that's a similar thing to tiny houses. It's just an indication of what you care about, and none of my closest friends drive brand new sports cars that cost $200,000. So that's maybe it's just because I know poor folks, or maybe it's a priority thing, you know. So I don't know if that's helpful to anyone. Oh, the other thing I wanted to cover is people ask me about being lonely out here. I do live in a quiet rural spot. I'm not lonely. Well, I guess that's not entirely fair. Every now and then I'm lonely, but that's an internal thing, if you know what I mean. It has nothing to do with the presence or absence of other people. If you've ever experienced that, I think you know what I'm talking about. But in general, no, I'm not lonely. I enjoy quiet time. I enjoy the peace and quiet. I am more naturally of an introvert, even though some of my friends for many years, because I did so many things with so many people. I used to have a house full of people all the time. I hosted couch surfers, if you're familiar with that concept, people traveling around the world. I hosted hundreds of people from all over the globe in my home. It's something I wouldn't mind having a little more space to do comfortably again at some point in my life, but I also really do enjoy the peace and quiet. And though I like people and I like taking care of people, just again for me personally, even when I plan something with like you, my best friend, and I know you're coming over for dinner tomorrow night, and I want you to come, and once you come, we have fun and we have a great conversation, I'm very glad you were here. I just have this, it's even weird to me, this little reaction of like shortly before you get here, like, oh, well, if I was sick or if the weather was bad or if you didn't come, then I would just be by myself and that would be okay. And I don't know why I have that reaction, because I'm talking about people I care about and that I like having them here. But that's just a personality thing. And I do see lots of people. I have a couple neighbors I see frequently. I have a couple of good friends in the neighbor, the general area. We get together and have dinners, talk, go snowshoe, ski, backpack, that kind of thing. I do have several close friends from when I was, younger and growing up. Most of us are spread out over a pretty wide geographic area, and so our friendships are mostly phone-based and occasional physical visit-based. But I am blessed to have a lot of really good friends in my life. And so, no, I'm not lonely. And I just, again, people's personalities are different. I just don't personally crave the hustle and bustle of having lots of other human beings around all the time. That's stressful for me. I'm not saying that's right or wrong for you. It's just, no, I'm not, I don't feel lonely and cut off and isolated here. So that's my perspective, my thoughts on relationships in general as it relates to being a tiny house resident. A lot of that, like I said, is just my personal thoughts and feelings. You're probably a different person. You may feel very, very differently, but maybe it helps you think through what would and would not be an issue for you personally if you do live in one, or if you care about somebody who does live in one, or if you wonder if that would be a problem if you did move into a tiny house or whatever. Anyway, that's just my thoughts. Maybe that'll help somebody think through whatever they're trying to figure out for themselves. Thanks for watching, folks. If you're interested in more info on my off-grid tiny house life, check out some of my other videos here. And if you like what you're seeing, click the little picture of my house to subscribe, and then hit the little bell so YouTube actually notifies you every time there's a new video available. See y'all next time.